Well, it is very fitting here in our 800th episode of In the Circle that this guest is the 800th guest. 800 is part of the 800th episode. She has not been on 800 times. She has a life. But this is her eighth appearance all time on In the Circle, and this is the fourth straight year that she's agreed to do our season preview. It's become one of the most anticipated episodes every year that we do. And I speak of our good friend Amanda Scarborough, two-time All-American, Hall of Famer at Texas A&M, and of course ESPN analyst. Well, congrats! You're part of the 800th episode of this podcast.
Well, congrats to you. What a huge accomplishment. And also, that's a lot of talking, Eric.
It's a lot of talking. You've helped over the years. Like I said, we've interviewed you at the World Series. We've had you on during the Little League Softball World Series. I remember you're like, I'm also available right before the season. Maybe we should do that instead. I'm like, all right. And we've done it 4 years in a row, and it's always one of the most downloaded episodes because people have that appetite for the start of the season, which we'll get
Ready?
into. We'll get into, but do you have an off season? Because we were talking off the air. You just came off a year where you not only did your normal college softball season, but you called Athletes Unlimited. You also called the Little League Softball World Series. In fact, I remember there was one week where you literally did both in the same week, like
Yeah.
back and
Yeah.
forth. And oh, by the way, you're still doing your pitching angel as well on the side. Describe 2023 for you, because I don't feel you had an off season.
Yeah. Usually my off season is in January. I feel like that month. So I feel like the month of January is like my summer, pretty much. I try to do a little getaway. But yeah, last season I called over 100 games. So super grateful for all the opportunities getting to call AU for the first time. And I've done the Little League World Series for several years now, and that event just continues to grow and grow and grow. And our championship game at the Little League Softball World Series was on ABC, which was huge. So between college and little league and professional, I get to see softball at all the different levels, which I absolutely love. And doing over 100 games, which is just a tribute to our sport and how much it just continues to grow, and the more opportunities that I get, but other people get as well across the sport.
How do you kind of flip the page, if you will? You go from a college season right to the pros. Then, like I said, you had the Little League Softball World Series, which means you got to follow it from like the regionals on and who ends up getting to. But at the same time, there's an Athletes Limited. How were you able to flip the channel there? What's that like from a preparation standpoint?
It's not as hard, I don't feel like, as it might seem like, because they're just so different. Like the Little League prep is so different than the AU prep. And Athletes Unlimited, just their support and that organization and everything that they provide you with, and the access to the athletes and how they take care of the athletes and being able to chat with them and hear all about their season. I mean, it makes it really easy because there's not a wall between the players and the broadcasters. It's super open, and getting to talk to the rookies, getting to talk to the veterans, getting to learn more about AU. Like, I just loved all of the experience. And again, Little League is just so different and cute. And they're just growing up and seeing their parents in the stands. Like, they're just such on opposite ends of the spectrum that it makes it pretty easy, busy, but pretty easy to keep it separate.
Now, you've been doing the pitching angel how many years now?
Yeah, so Pitching Angel started in 2019. My
Wow.
online courses, which is when it really got going, started in 2020 during COVID, when everything was shut down. I started to make online training, which is now what I feel like Pitching Angel is more so known for. But yeah, that's what I do when I'm not calling games. That's actually a year-round thing that also keeps me busy, doing free trainings and course enrollments and posting on social. I just somehow I'm still like highly embedded in softball. And I know that I've told you this before, but if you would have asked me my senior year if I wanted at A&M, if I wanted anything to do with softball when I was done playing, I would have looked at you like you're crazy. Didn't want to coach, didn't want anything to do with softball. And now it's still all I do all these years later. But I love it.
Somehow you still feel able to fill in like watching Formula One races. That's
Oh
how
my
that
gosh, I have to. That and tennis is like my new jam too. Watching
tennis.
the Australian Open. Yes,
Whoa!
I
How
know.
how am I just learning this? I'm like a sicko tennis fan. Like I'm the
Are
one that
you?
stays up at 5 in the morning, watches Fowler and company every year in the Australian Open, and then follow it all the way through Wimbledon and U.S. Open. I'm a big tennis geek.
I just got into it really in the fall.
Ooh.
I think just like kind of binging the US Open. Then I watched, of course, the Netflix series Breakpoint, and then
Ah.
just couldn't wait for the Australian Open this year. So, well, actually, I think it might have started in Wimbledon and then the US Open. But oh, yeah, I've been loving every second of it. So fun. And F1, just the life and hobbies, I guess, of sports outside of softball.
You
It's funny.
got to. You got to.
Yeah.
Do you have a tennis favorite?
I really like Sinner.
Yannick Sinner
And
just won his first major in Australia.
yeah, he's super likable and easy to root for. And of course, I like Coco Gauff. She's easy to root for too. And Sabalenka, I like all three of those. I watch men's and women's. It's easy just to get captivated in it. It's so much more interesting than I thought maybe 5 years ago or 7 years ago. I love watching it now.
You need to do like the U.S. Open or Wimbledon, like on your checklist. That needs to be on your bucket list.
Well, what's great is that three of the four Grand Slams are not during softball season. The only one that is the French. So
Correct.
leaves a lot of opportunity to go and check it out.
That is correct. Who's your favorite F1 race driver right now?
Charles Leclerc, Ferrari.
Wow, a lot of headlines going on right now over there with Lewis Hamilton. We're talking off the air, changing, going. He's going to like the portal, changing cars there. But what are you going
Look
to
at
do?
us. We know more than just softball, Eric, me and you. We're
Well,
more than
clearly,
softball.
I got to bring you on during the off season. Just talk F1 and now tennis. I've learned now every year you're on, I learn something new about you. I've known you for a long time now. I think we're going over a decade. We're friends, and I learn something new every year from you.
I try to be dynamic here, learn some new tricks every now and then, or some new hobbies, I guess I should say.
Well, let me ask you about this trick. You mentioned the pitching angel and the lessons you do. Does this year one of the stories in softball is the pitch clock, 20-second pitch clock? Do you bring that up when you do lessons with young people as far as how quick you got to be with your delivery? How much of that has been a conversation?
I don't yet with the youth. But I will tell you, I'm very excited about the pitch clock, how hopefully we'll speed up the game because calling athletes unlimited games, they have 15 seconds in between pitches with their pitch clock. And calling the games, going from the college games at the World Series to the athletes unlimited games, like, the next week, it felt like I was a freshman again, like a freshman on a team, just trying to keep up. The game was moving so quickly, and I loved it. They're trying to get the games in faster. And then not only that, but the time in between pitches, as well as the one-way communication that hopefully we don't have to look at as many pitchers and teams try to figure out the wristband matrix on their arm. Like they'll still, likely be looking at it, but it will be much quicker where they don't have to look at, basically a spreadsheet on their wristband or on their on the wristband as they get in. I mean, that's just too many numbers for me. And I even like numbers, but like the way that we were calling pitches from the coach in the dugout to the pitcher in the circle, 5, 3, 2, and then you have to find the number on the matrix. I mean, that just would have been really difficult for me. Like I want to focus on the hitter. I want to focus on the count, the situation, the pitch that I need to throw, visualize it. Like it's just too much thinking. So I hope that this one-way communication can not only speed up the game, but give the pitchers a little bit more time to think and focus about what they need to do without trying to figure out the matrix on their arm.
How was it when you played? Was it did the coaches let you call the game? Was it the catcher? Like it, and do you ever remember when you played so much talk about pace of play? I don't think that ever was brought up. I think it was so fast, and I think it's recent last few years that it's picked up. I know some coaches have brought up the fact, there's replays when you have commercials, more games are streamed and broadcasted. It's going to automatically be a little longer. Some have pointed out there are more meetings, which also slows the pace down. But how do you think we got here?
I think everything that you just said, but I think that a really big one too is foul balls. The number of foul balls that we have due to hitters getting better and just making more contact to me is what it seems like. So foul balls take a really long time. And then I know too, I don't mean to sound like a pitcher here, but the strike zone just has been tight. And when the strike zone seems taller, or smaller, I should say, you notice that walks go up. You look at the box score and you're seeing 8, 12. I mean, there were games with 15 to 16 base on balls in it. And that's just going to slow the game down in itself because then hitters are taking more. then pitchers are throwing more. And then if they're taking more, Eric, what do they have to do? If the hitters are taking more, then pitchers have to come more on the plate. And when you come more on the plate, there's going to be more contact, whether that's a home run, a hit, a ball put in play, or what I just was talking about, a foul ball. So I think that there's a lot of things that attribute to it. So we'll see how this goes. We were supposed to have a quote unquote pitch clock or timing in between pitches before this year. That might be a surprise to a lot of fans because you just don't hear about it very often and it's not a big clock on the field. But we were supposed to have 25 seconds in between every pitch, but that just wasn't getting called by the umpires nearly as much as it should have. And it was causing 25, 30, 35, sometimes even 40 seconds in between pitches. So hopefully this year is different.
Some have said too, coaches I've talked to, batters can help in this too, right? Getting to the box quicker. Because I'm a little defensive with pitchers. Because when I started, covering softball, when you played, you would make, it was, hey, every pitch matters. It's the most important pitch in the game. That's what makes it exciting as a pitcher. But yet I feel like we're sending mixed messages saying, hey, every pitch matters. It's the most important. But please, can you do it real fast? Like I
Yeah.
feel there's a mixed message there.
Yeah, you're right. The batter, having to be in the box, I think, with 10 seconds left on that pitch clock that we're referring to is new. So hopefully that will help. It was just getting a little out of hand, Eric. Like you said, the timeouts that were being called from the catchers, the meetings, the just so much time. And the umpires want, like, that's the cool thing is like the umpires just want to respect the game and what you're talking about, the flow of like understanding that it's a big moment and that there might be more time in between pitches. But I feel like that was taken advantage of. And in our sport, every game is matters so much. So it's not, Eric, like, oh, A&M is playing Texas and there's just this one really big game of the month. Like every game is so important. So when you put so much emphasis on every pitch, every game, like it feels in our sport right now from February on, then the games just get longer and longer and longer. And we don't have just 12 or 14 games in a season. We're having 56 games or however many it is, where it just seems to just really drag everything out. So I'm a fan. I'm excited for it. And I can't wait to see how it affects the game times at the end of the season when we average it all out.
I'm going to be interested to see how the umpires, put the 20 seconds there because, you're becoming a tennis fan. One of the tennis added a serve clock. And that's been a little controversial because sometimes what the chairman kind of is a very subjective on when does the pitch, when does the serve clock start. Some people felt like, for example, Rafael Nadal, who takes a while, and he's my favorite tennis player. So I say that. But some people think he got the benefit of the doubt, whereas other tennis players maybe don't get the benefit of the doubt. And every chairperson has their own like more strict than others. Could we, that's my wondering if are we going to see similar with the umpires where some might be more lenient than others? Do they bet if it's a certain pitcher that's more well known than a other pitcher? Do they get more of a benefit of doubt? So I'm really interested to see how all this plays out this season. Plus, they've modified the illegal pitch this year rule in there. What was your reaction to that?
Um, I get why. I just, from a youth perspective, because I'm in it all the time, I'm just not really a fan. Um, I think that allowing the both feet to disengage from the playing surface is what the rule change was. And in the past, you had to keep your drag foot dragging on the ground, or else it would be an illegal pitch. And just for everybody to know, like, now that's not the rule. Now your drag foot can come up in the air as kind of slang term, aka a leap. You still cannot replant or repush after you leave the ground. So that still would be illegal. But I think by allowing the leap, what you do is open a can of worms for now people to complain about the replant, which is still illegal. I think two younger pitchers, are going to try to do that. When I'm saying younger pitchers, I don't mean freshmen and sophomores in college. I mean 11, 12, 13 years old who are in the development stages. It's like such a common question in my inbox lately with the young pitchers is, what do you teach? What do you think we should do? And my way of saying it is just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Just because a pitcher can leap doesn't necessarily mean, like that's what you should be learning and everybody should now leap. Um, I think a leap, that we see with pitchers happens sometimes naturally. Like they're not trying to do it. Maybe nobody taught them to do it. when you're watching them pitch, like a Jordy or an Emma Lemley, it just naturally happens that their foot disengages from the ground and then it comes back down. So there's just such a fine line, and I was under the camp. I just would have liked to have seen the drag continue. That might sound old school, and and maybe it is, but I just think that by changing the rule, it now goes from one open can of worms to a new one that people are going to continue to complain about.
You're making it more complicated for the umpires too, right? Because that's been a complaint that some coaches defended. The umpires say a lot of this stuff gets in the gray area, and
Yeah.
now it's like one umpire may look at it one way versus another umpire, and that's where it creates maybe some frustration and maybe some inconsistencies.
Yeah. I that's what we're going for, is consistency. So I'm interested to see now what happens, because I just really feel like we're trying to avoid illegal pitches being called, but what I think will be happen is that still illegal pitches are called for a replant and not a leap. So um yeah, we'll see. I'm hopeful, because I just want to be glass half full, but I'm concerned as well. We'll see how it goes.
How much you mention it, the feedback you get on the inbox, questions you get from the youth, from people that, from parents, I'm sure, from youth players that are playing. How much does that enhance? Do you have that in the back of your mind when you're going to be doing commentary? The fact that you kind of know what the people that are watching, what they're looking for, and you kind of have that unique perspective, and maybe you feel like, hey, we got to explain this on the broadcast because this is what people are talking about because that's the feedback I've been getting.
Yeah. Well, I think what makes it so confusing, Eric, is that it's different at every level and at different organizations. So these youth players could go play one tournament and they can leap. And then they play in another tournament and they can't leap. Or, a few years ago when we changed the rule that a pitcher's, if you're a right-handed pitcher, your left foot, your back foot when you start, so not your drag foot, but your stride foot can start off of the pitching rubber. Remember, that was a huge rule change, that both feet did not have to start on the pitching rubber. Well, at the young levels, it's like start back versus step back. Can you step back, or does your back foot have to start back? And there's just all these different rules and changes, and there's not one source of consistency with what we're going to go by, from the international level to the college level to the high school to youth. And when you're starting, and it just causes a lot of confusion, and it's very difficult actually to answer questions, because I'm not up to date on what Alliance is doing versus PGF versus all the different USA softball, all the different organizations and their different rules and what they're doing at tournaments. Like, it just is very confusing. Very.
Do you think everybody needs to kind of figure out a way to kind of be consistent across the board? Would that make it easier? I mean, maybe it's not as easy as I'm saying it, but is that the solution,
I
perhaps?
would, yeah, I think that would be the solution. Maybe what you do at the international level is what college and beyond does, or maybe if you don't want to go up that high, you say what we're doing at the college level is what everybody is going to do underneath it. But a lot of different rules, a lot of different opinions, and just a lot of confusion, especially when it comes, to the pitching rules, is really where I think that you see it the most.
Do people? Well, I'm going to say it. I think people should reach out to you and get your thoughts and have your feedback on that. Because I do think that's important. You're a very important person in the sport. You've played it. You've seen it from all levels. I think that would be, I they should reach out to you for input, like they do in other sports, where they reach out to commentators and or people that are very important in the sport for their input on the game.
Yeah, I just think it's important, especially because I think it is a general consensus that pitching in general, or pitchers in general, are not as dominant as they were, call it, 15, 20 years ago. And because hitters are getting so much better, and technology and being able to scout them, and maybe the development hasn't been as good in the youth levels potentially as um I don't know. I think I always go back to this, and I think I say this to you every year, but having the pitchers having to throw from 43 feet at such a young age, I think is detrimental to the development of pitchers. And go from, people might not know this, but you start out playing and 10U with an 11-inch ball, so a smaller ball than they play in college. And then you quickly have to move back in pitching distance and go up in the softball size. And that's just hard for an 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-old pitcher, which are huge developmental years, but like they're throwing a ball that is bigger than their hand. And so they're not only having to throw a bigger ball, but move back in distance. And then I just think overall, since they changed that, I think it was maybe 10 to 15 years ago now, it all blends together. But I think that since they've changed that, you're starting to see the trickle up effect in the college ages from those pitchers having to do it at a young age and go through those changes at a young age, that the pitchers, in my opinion, just are not as strong as what they used to be when you had more time to develop. Again, I will say I didn't throw from 43 feet until I got to college. So I threw 40 feet for many, many, many years. In middle school and then through high school, and did not throw from 43 feet until I
Wow.
got to Texas A&M. And now they start throwing from 43 feet at like 13 or 14 years old very quickly.
Wow. That is amazing.
I think I mean, I think it's one of the biggest things in our sport that nobody talks about, because honestly, you need some sort of like 30-minute conversation PowerPoint on it because it is pretty intricate. But I think it's hurting the development of our pitchers. And the last thing that I'll say about it is that it hurts their mentality. If you're struggling with the size of the ball and the distance that you're pitching and just being a smaller pitcher when you're younger, not only are you going to not be throwing as hard and not maybe throw as many strikes, but it hurts your confidence. And I think that we're seeing pitchers that are not as confident as what they used to be, along with not having the stuff that maybe, we saw 15, 20, 25 years ago. Because that you remember walking people and giving up more hits or being scared of a ball coming back at you. Like all of that affects a pitcher's mentality to where they get to the college level now. And it's more, survive when they're younger versus thrive when they're younger. And it's a different mentality for a pitcher to go and to enter into a game and enter in the circle with.
You're not the first. Somebody brought it up to me recently about the size of the ball being a part of it, of an adjustment. And I've had coaches tell me, Trisha Ford's like, why don't we just, why does the ball have to be as big on the college level? Like I never thought of it. She stumped me on that. Like I never really
Yeah.
thought of it, and now you just brought up that example. I'm not saying that they should shrink it or not. I don't know with opinion, but that is that is a factor in the development. Is if you're used to a certain size of a ball as a pitcher growing, and next thing you know, it's bigger. It's just it's fascinating to me how inconsistent we are as a sport in all this. This doesn't happen in baseball, for example, or the other sports.
Well, yeah, I mean, because they throw a small baseball and a boy's size hand, at a certain age of puberty and maturity is going to be bigger than a girl's hand. And they're throwing a smaller ball. Like it really, it really is interesting. And again, this is such a big topic. And I know we want to talk about college softball, but it's fascinating to me. And I think it's a underlying factor of some things that we see right now in the college game.
This is why we bring you on every year. You always bring a fascinating perspective, and I appreciate that. We could go hours for that. But one team that hasn't had trouble, regardless of whatever rules
Let
is
me guess.
Oklahoma.
Let me
Yeah,
guess.
go.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, they seem to do just fine with whatever rules you want to bring up there. They're starting their quest for a four-peat. It's never been done in the history of college softball at any level. That is remarkable. Think about it. Division 1, 2. It's never happened before. Give me just your thoughts as somebody who's played in the sport. We have so much more depth and parity, but yet Oklahoma has overcome that with 3 straight national titles. They're going to go for a 4th without Jordy Ball, which is part of the narrative this year. But just kind of your thoughts here on the Sooners, because they're certainly going to be the headliner this year again.
Well, what an amazing senior class they have to have won a national championship in every year that they've played at Oklahoma wearing that uniform. And I think that you saw at times Oklahoma really struggle with the pressure. I think that Patty Gasso was even pretty open about that. If you talk to her now, and if you talk to her at times, last year, especially when things were over and they had three-peated, like just how the pressure got, they felt it. They felt chasing all these different records. The pressure of, the win streak and winning in Big 12 and so many things that added pressure to them. Seemed like it only brought them closer together. I'm sure it was a grind at times, but I think that you saw them get closer at the World Series and be able to work through some struggle. I'm putting air quotes around this, but struggles at times. Last year, I use that term very loosely, but I think mentally there were times that were challenging for them last year, which those struggles are only going to help make them feel more at ease and more confident with returners coming in this year, having three-peated, having gone through that, having had a strong senior class this year with just so many players that have played pretty much, every game of their career since they were freshmen.
It's incredible, the senior leadership, but the questions will be in the circle. Kelly Maxwell comes over from Oklahoma State, which has been a hot topic all offseason in the state of Oklahoma. In there, they've added Carly Keeney from Liberty. You mentioned her, Monticelli is a kid they've added from Wisconsin. Nicole May returns. Kirsten Deal is a kid that was a freshman last year, was the number one prospect a couple of years ago. How do you see the staff without Jordy Ball? But Kelly Maxwell steps into that role as a Sooner after being a Cowgirl.
I would imagine. I mean, we just got done talking about how last year they may have felt pressure at times, and I think they did as a team. I think, if anything, maybe their pitching staff could feel that additional pressure this year. I would think it is so, being a pitcher myself, being Kelly Maxwell and being an All-American and having the success, like I just think the pressure that you feel as a pitcher at Oklahoma is different than being a pitcher on any other team. So I'm interested to see how not only Kelly is able to handle that, and she has Jen Rocha, with her, the one of the best pitching coaches in the country, but Carly Keeney, how does she handle that? Peyton Monticelli, how do they like? There's a different feel for a really important big group of their staff that's never pitched in an Oklahoma uniform before. So they're all very talented. We know that. I think it will just be about mentally, how can they handle being a pitcher there and leading the way. But Peyton Monticelli's rise ball is fantastic, and so is Kelly Maxwell. And Nicole May has thrown a lot of big innings for them too. And when Kirsten Dill had to come in and do some work late in the postseason, she handled it really well. So a deep staff, but I think some unknowns for sure of how they'll handle everything mentally of wearing that uniform.
They'll be in their final year in the Big 12, which is still strange to say, but it's reality. This is Oklahoma's last year in the Big 12. This is Texas's last year in the Big 12. I talked to Mike White. He's excited about this freshman class he's got coming in, which is kind of scary because that freshman class last year did very well, as you know very well. They're now sophomores, and they've gained that experience. They're hungry. What's your thoughts? First of all, what's your thoughts of the Big 12? It's a fascinating storyline. You got Oklahoma and Texas in their last year. You got UCF, BYU, Houston joining the league. We're not even going to get into next year with Arizona State, Utah joining. I mean, you pitched in the Big 12. You played in it. I mean, there's always been turnover in the Big 12, but this is a unique year that they'll be documented for decades from now. They'll be talking about this.
I love that it will be deeper again. I mean, I remember, in years past, the Big 12 didn't even start conference play until like the end of March or something. So it's like all the other schools are starting the first or second weekend or second week of March. Like they're starting so much earlier. They have more conference games than what the Big 12 had. So I love the depth that Houston and UCF and BYU add to the Big 12. I think it will make it a little bit more interesting. Oklahoma will, of course, still be up at the top, but who's going to come in second? Will it be Texas? And what does Oklahoma State look like? So different. Will it be Baylor sneaking in there? So, or will UCF, give everybody a run for their money and finish second? Like, I think that there will be some additional conference losses that, some of these teams other than OU might potentially have, because the strength of the conference just takes a step forward.
Great. They got to go to Austin. I think Texas is really loaded this year. Baylor was the team that beat Oklahoma last year. They got everybody pretty much back. If they're healthy, some people, they could be a team that's a national seed. Glenn Moore really likes this group a lot. I haven't really seen Glenn really is enthusiastic about this bunch going in. And Oklahoma State is kind of the mystery team because obviously everybody knows about the Kelly Maxwell situation leaving, but they've got new assistants. They lost a ton of bats and veteran leaderships to where I interviewed Kenny, and Kenny admitted, like, I don't know what I have, and I might not know until the first couple weeks of the season. We might learn on the fly how young they are.
I mean, we're talking about a team in Oklahoma State that's been at the World Series every year that we've had it since 2019. And the fact that they lost 6 of their 9 lineup starters from their last Women's College World Series game and is like mind blowing. Like, not only do you lose the seniors to graduation, but you lost Kelly, who you thought that you would have. You lost Caitlin Carwile, who decided to retire to go on and pursue, I think, a career job or whatever, like something educationally. Um, and you lost your pitching coach, and like it just is it's going to be a very different looking Oklahoma State team. But I also feel like that's kind of when Kenny Gajewski and Oklahoma State thrives, is as the underdog, kind of that back to 2019 mentality where maybe nobody's expecting as much out of them, and then they get to come together strong as at the end of the year, and he gets to build up these players when everybody's questioning them a little bit. So I still have faith because, Kenny Gajewski is a great coach, but I'm very interested. This seems to be a little bit of a rebuilding year, although, they returned Kyra Acock and Lexi Hilfoyle in the circle, and they threw a bunch down the stretch, and actually, in my opinion, threw better than Kelly toward the end of the year and in the postseason.
I agree. I just spoke to Lexi Kilfoyle for the podcast I did with Oklahoma State, and I could sense the confidence. There's that senior leadership too. There's something about that. They know it's that last year. I think they've got a bit of a chip on the shoulder from that standpoint, and it's going to be interesting. Well, you're going to see them right up in person. You're going to see Oklahoma State in person. You're going to be in Clearwater. UCF's going to be there as well, and Texas. So we're going to learn about those three right away in Clearwater to see how, what they look like early on week 2 in the season, which is kind of wild.
Well, and opening weekend, we have on ESPN UCLA, Texas, and UCLA, Oklahoma State.
I
So
know we're starting early here. Wow.
yeah, that's right. That'd be great. Can't wait to see those. We never have softball opening weekend, especially on ESPN 1. So awesome for our sport that we get to have those 2 games. I can't wait.
How many monitors you're going to have like turned on?
Oh my gosh, I always have the 4 screen on my Apple TV. I got to be watching 4 at a time for sure, and try to sneak maybe 1 or 2 more in there if I can.
Of course, a league that has been always at the top among the sport, their swan song, as far as we know, is that's the Pac-12. You mentioned UCLA. They're going to open with Texas Oklahoma State. Young this year, very young, especially in the circle. Very young. It's very unique. Very few innings there. Experience with UCLA. Stanford, which was everybody's darling last year, pushed arguably Oklahoma. Them and FSU probably pushed Oklahoma to the limit there at the World Series. They returned Kennedy, who's probably one of the big faces in the sport. They added Taryn Kern from Indiana. Washington returns a good, decent Ruben Malin and company there from their World Series team. Give me your thoughts on the Pac-12 in a year where it's kind of bizarre. I've talked to all the Pac-12 coaches. There's a bit of a mixed feelings because there's some sadness because this is it. The last year of the Pac-12, a conference that's meant so much to the sport, but everybody understands it's kind of beyond their control. And I think there's some motivation of let's go out with a bang.
Yeah, for sure. I'm even thinking about how the Pac-12 ended the season last year with, Utah won the Pac-12 tournament, right? And made it to the World Series. And you saw Utah, Stanford, and Washington at the World Series. And you didn't have UCLA there, who went 0-2. And you didn't have Arizona because they didn't even make the tournament. And you didn't have Arizona State either, who also has national championships in that conference. So it was a really weird ending, I feel like, when you look back to the 2023 season for the Pac. And that's why I feel like you enter this season and you don't really know how Utah is going to rebound from their year last year. That was an incredible run. You don't know how Arizona and Arizona State are going to look this year at all. Like, have they mixed things up? Are they going to be stronger? Are they going to be able to make the tournament again? And to your point, we're so reliant on UCLA having an All-American pitcher in the circle, and we know who we're going to get, but their staff hasn't thrown a lot of innings. We don't know them very well. Like, Caitlin Terry is a freshman for them who's supposed to be a stud pitcher, hitter, somebody really strong. And then Taylor Tinsley, who didn't get to throw a ton last year. We saw her some, but that question mark makes it super interesting for UCLA. And how about Stanford getting picked by the coaches poll to win the Pac-12? I think maybe for the first time ever, right? First time in history,
Yep.
Stanford was picked to win the Pac. Which is amazing. Like, everything is just all mixed up for this last year, and I can't wait to see how it pans out.
Stanford will host the Pac-12 tournament too. What do you make of them? Because now the expectations are through the roof after the run last year, getting to the World Series, which was cool to see the alums there. But now the expectations are through the roof. I'm kind of curious how they handle that. And I think you got teams like Oregon, maybe it's under the radar, that could be a
Yeah.
sleeper in the Pac-12.
Yeah, that's so true. Oregon is another one that we haven't even mentioned yet, who finished their year at Supers and looking to build on what they did last year. I am interested with Stanford. We know Kennedy is amazing. I mean, what she did at the World Series when she dominated OU's lineup inning after inning was something that I'll never forget. And I think that it just shows you how strong and incredible she is. I mean, she is truly one of the best pitchers in our sport right now. No questions asked, maybe the best pitcher in our sport. And so to watch her pitch and do what she did at the World Series, now, there's going to be some more info and technology out there on her and a better preparation for her, I think. Even though everybody knew her last year, they didn't know her like the way that they're going to this year. And I think, Eric, what makes Stanford interesting is who's going to pitch behind her, because Elena Votter was so good behind her and gave such a different look. She was experienced. She had more of a down ball, and now she's at South Carolina. So not only are we seeing Kennedy in her sophomore year, but we're seeing her without Votter, which is going to put more pressure on her, I feel like. We'll see what she looks like this year, which I have a feeling it'll be really good, but will it be as good as last year?
I was going to be fat. I talked to Coach Allister about that. They like Krause a lot, who was their number 3
Yeah.
last year. Didn't get a chance to pitch because Kennedy and Votter kind of took the reins in the postseason. But they're high on Krause to have a big year. They have a freshman that they like a lot, and they're gonna get tested right away. They open at San Diego State, and then we're gonna see them in Clearwater week 2. Man, just the stat, which is rare to see Stanford there in Clearwater area. So that's gonna be fascinating to see. To your point, do they have that depth in the pitching there to back and their offense? Do they take that next step offensively and be more explosive on the offensive end? I think will be interesting with them.
Yeah, Taryn Kern will help for sure.
Yes. So it's going to be interesting in the Pac-12. Of course, you mentioned Elena Votter. That's one of the storylines in the SEC as she's at South Carolina. You got Tennessee, Georgia at the top, the favorites. You were on the Georgia bandwagon before anybody else was a year ago. Remember, we did the show. Who's your Georgia this year? Who's the team that you think could sneak up and, I don't know if surprise is the proper word, but a team that you're like can make some noise either probably perhaps in the SEC?
I think Georgia is the Georgia this year, to be honest, but maybe something like A&M actually. And I mean, I feel like South Carolina too, being able to build on what they had last year. And I know that Donnie Goborn was, a huge part of their success last year, but bringing in Vaughter and their team having the experience and getting that deep run into the SEC tournament like they did. And I think that was really good for them. And could have rejuvenated, that team and their energy and confidence coming into the season. And I think A&M, will take another step forward too with Trisha Ford. It's going to be her second year as head coach. They have a lot of returners, brought in some impactful transfers, um, deeper outfield. Like I feel like that's a team that can, they ended the season ranked in the top 25 for the first time in a few years and finished higher than what anybody thought they were going to finish in the SEC. And Trisha Ford is super competitive. She's going to want to finish even higher. So could they finish top 6, top 5? I don't even know, top 4 maybe. It all depends on scheduling too, which I need to look a little bit deeper into because, in the SEC, you don't play everybody. So your schedule and who you play that year matters a lot in terms of winning the SEC. But yeah, I mean, Tennessee and Georgia both getting 6 first place votes. How about that being a bit split right down the middle of the line there?
Very split. I'm with you. On Georgia. I think Georgia to me is my pick for the SEC, and I think they're a legitimate threat for Oklahoma City, and maybe be the pick as far as who's the national title contender out of the SEC who can push Oklahoma is Georgia because they got the bats to match Oklahoma, and if that pitching depth that they have experience wise takes that next step, that could be the team that's a national title contender there for Coach Baldwin. Tony Baldwin said this is the best roster that he can remember since he's been at Georgia, which is saying something.
Yeah, it seems like, they added some transfers. Lily Backus from UNC is going to give their pitching staff some depth and a different look. But you mentioned their offense. I crunched the numbers earlier this week. They returned 96% of their home runs, 97% of their RBI, and then 90% of the innings pitched last season. So this is a team when we say like they're bringing everybody back, they're literally bringing everybody back. And they're going to be hungry too. I think that they were disappointed last year, not to make it to the World Series, and they're going to be more experienced and having Tony as their head coach, for more experience with him as the head coach, like a deeper pitching staff. Like I think that this team has all the tools, the step forward that they took defensively again with JT D'Amico. I think that this team is just getting better and better and stronger and stronger.
Alabama begins life without Montana Fouts. I would know because she was a guest speaker at the opening night dinner at UCF that I got to host recently. And she's focused on other stuff now, like the U.S. national team. So it's going to be interesting what Alabama looks like without her. Alabama's added Caleb Breaux. We lose big loss on the broadcasting end, big ad for Patrick Murphy. And then Florida literally returns 0 innings pitched ever. That's amazing. They have one of the top prospects in Keegan Rothrock leading the way there. New pitching coach, Chelsea Dobbins. Oh, yeah, Francesca Nail leaving the booth to go join there. What's your thoughts on Bama and Florida? Very interesting storylines, especially in the circle. Bama beginning life without Fouts. Florida as the most inexperienced pitching staff that I can remember with Tim Walton has even acknowledged that. It's really interesting to see where these two go.
I know. We'll see. I don't know. I feel like there's so much unknowns with both of those teams, which is why they were picked to finish 6th and 7th. So Alabama 6th and then Florida 7th, which actually, despite getting picked 7th in the coach poll, they still had a first place vote, interesting enough, in that coaches poll. So a lot of unknowns. Ava Brown is somebody who's from Texas, a pitcher hitter. I know that she's touted and a lot of expectations on her. She's Gatorade National Player of the Year, I believe, to be maybe the next Lauren Hager. So a couple of freshmen that they're going to be relying on. I think that they're going to be able to swing it pretty well. I think Jocelyn Erickson back behind the plate is going to be another big left-handed bat in their lineup. And I think they'll be able to hit it. The pitching will be the question mark. And then with Alabama bringing in Kayla Beaver from Central Arkansas, hopefully she'll do well for them, and we'll try to make that transition minus Montana Fouts a little bit easier. But God, Montana was there all the way back in 2019, and it's 2024. It's going to be so weird to watch Alabama play without Montana Fouts.
That is the 100% truth on that. I agree. I saw Florida in the fall. They're going to score a ton of runs. Erickson looked great in the fall. Coach Walton thinks she could have a monster year. They're excited about her, and they still got Falby. They still got Skylar Wallace. They got a ton there that they like. It's just a question of that. They literally have no experienced pitchers. Like they have 3 pitchers. They got to stay healthy. That's going to be go that gauntlet in the SEC is fascinating. Alabama will be interesting too what they do offensively, but Florida's going to be a really intriguing team.
Well, and I don't think we can talk about the SEC without talking about Kiki Malloy. Like
Yeah,
we've gotten this far, and we talked a little bit about Tennessee, and not a really deep pitching staff. Interesting enough for Tennessee, we were looking at that before we started the Zoom. I think they have 4 arms on their staff, and one of them is not Ashley Rogers. So no Montana Fouts, no Ashley Rogers. What will Tennessee staff look like? Carlin Pickens had a great year last year as a freshman, but we saw her command lacking, at the end of the year. And if she's going to be taking the bulk of the innings, maybe with Peyton Gottschall, they're gonna need her, and they don't have a deep pitching staff. Interesting enough, but Kiki Malloy, of course, and Skylar Wallace, the 3 finalists for National Player of the Year last year, are returning. And this is going to be their last years, right? Like I feel like they've been there forever, but
it's
this is
amazing.
indeed their last year. So our
Yeah.
last chance to watch them. But Kiki Malloy is just incredibly special defensively and offensively.
2 of the best players in the country. Another name, Aaron Koffel of Kentucky, one to watch there
Yes.
too. The SEC, they're talented there. Auburn's host is the host for the SEC tournament. Penta, great pitcher there. Mickey Dean, could this be the year for Auburn to maybe get that next step, maybe host? They've kind of been stuck in that let's go to Clemson regional. They're just missing out there, but they've been quietly a top half SEC team the last couple of years with their pitching.
Well, yeah, and them and then LSU, can they
LSU,
rebound from
yeah.
last year? How about I mean, you just forget that LSU has not made it to a super regional in the past couple of years, and they have now a senior class that have basically been a bulk group of starters since their freshman years. So, a couple of underperforming seasons that you might say with LSU the past couple of seasons, and now they have this really deep, senior class with Taylor Pleasance and company. What are they going to do this year? How are they going to look? Are they going to be able to make it to supers and then potentially make the World Series? But pick to finish third. We'll see how they do despite an early exit last year.
Most experienced offense in the Torina era. They bring just about everybody back. I mean, basically except one. They have obviously Briggs, Pleasance, as you mentioned. Coffee returns. Sidney Berzon returns as the pitcher. They added Kelly Lynch, who's going to be a two-way there. It's all there, and they kind of had some bad luck last year. They got put in the same draw with Louisiana, who could have hosted, and that's a big rivalry. We went to a game 7 in Baton Rouge, and player two could have made the difference there. That's the uniqueness of it, but they do have a ton of experience there for LSU with those bats, and I think they're motivated from that standpoint. Of course, Louisiana got to the Super. Let me ask you this, because we've kind of had a trend now. Last year we had Louisiana and San Diego State get to the Supers. 2 years ago we had UCF from the American get to the Supers. The year before that, of course, was James Madison getting to the World Series. Who's that non-power five, if you will, that you got your eye on this year that you think could make some noise? Is it Louisiana again? That's going to be that's become a trend, which is kind of cool in the sport to see. Is there's that surprise factor that comes in from the non-power five that will make some noise in the postseason. It's just a matter of who that is this year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like San Diego State and Louisiana are two good contenders, and what Liberty did
Yeah.
last year too as well. They had a great year, although they lost their catcher and their pitcher to the transfer portal. So I like Louisiana. They returned Sam Landry. That team, you saw them play really well at times, and they had some down moments too. But I think that's a team, if they can just put it all together at the right time, that really is a team that could make it to the World Series. So Sam Landry is just so good in the circle.
Well, and the fact they finally got over the hump and won a regional since Jerry's been there, maybe
Yeah.
that's now the next step. As you know, you got to take baby steps sometimes. Maybe that gets them set up there. They're the overwhelming favorites in the Sun Belt. Texas State returns Mullins back in the circle. Maybe arguably the best mid-major pitcher in the country. You can make that case for her at Texas State. That would be another team to watch there, and we'll see. I mean, Wichita State begins life without Sidney McKinney. So Liberty, I like Liberty though. They do return I know talking to Dot Richardson, they like the group that they have there, and they're kind of tired of being that bridesmaid. They were the regional final last year in Los Angeles. They eliminated UCLA, but lost to San Diego State. They've been in the regional finals now a couple times, including Knoxville, and they lost to JMU in the regional final. So they're kind of like, hey, it's our turn now. So they're very
Yeah.
motivated over there. In talking to Dot.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jessica Mullins. I love watching her pitch, and she does such a great job for that. They beat Texas last year, which was a big win for them, and she gives you a chance literally to beat anybody. And this is her last year, and she's so competitive. She's going to be coming out with a bang, I think.
Another picture that people enjoy watching is Jordy Ball, and that was the biggest story in softball that really transcended softball. Was her deciding to go back home, go to Nebraska, to the Cornhuskers. What are you looking forward to seeing from her now in Nebraska? And a lot of hype in that state. Talking to people over there, talking to Coach Ravel. I mean, season tickets are through the roof. There's a waiting list. So there's a lot of high expectations for her, and all eyes will be on her in that state.
Yeah, it's the Jordy Ball effect, right? Kind of like the Caitlin Clark effect. So there's something in the Big Ten going on, it seems like, with the women's sports, with the way too that people came out to support Nebraska volleyball with 100,000 fans, the way that Caitlin Clark has captivated the entire country. And I feel like Jordy Ball, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That was the biggest story in the offseason, and in my opinion, and maybe one of the biggest transfers that we'll ever see. I mean, usually people hit the portal because they're upset about playing time, but she's a two-time national champion and is now going back home. But I felt like that was kind of the theme that she started, was return home. I mean, she returned home. You saw Francesca Inez, you mentioned, go uh, return home back to the Florida coaching staff. Victoria Hayward and Courtney Gano back to Washington, joined the coaching staff, and then Taryn Kern going to play at Stanford. So I thought that was kind of a theme that Jordy started. But I think, there will be a lot of pressure on her there in a different way than what she felt it playing at Oklahoma, because now it's like all eyes are on Nebraska, and they go from making a regional to potential World Series contender because of her. I think that shows you the power of in our sport with one pitcher and how that can affect your team so much. Is that is the talk with them now, and Billy Andrews still there at Nebraska, and I feel like they've been building the past couple of years offensively and just competitive, what you've seen that. So mixed with having Jordy Ball on your staff now, they've got to be at least thinking about maybe even grabbing a regional host spot.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think they're the heavy favorites in the Big Ten, but it'll be interesting how the other Big Ten teams, do they now circle Nebraska and maybe have a chip on their shoulder because Nebraska's going to get all the love, get all the attention. Northwestern, the defending champs, very young. They lost a great core from their World Series teams. We're going to see them in Clearwater. We'll see what Coach Drohan, but they're very young, kind of the unknown of Northwestern there. But there'll be some motivation there, I'm sure, with all the attention with every time Jordy Ball pitches against them in that league, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. She's fantastic, truly in the top three pitcher in our sport, and such a hard worker. And I think, it'll be interesting to see if she hits for Nebraska. She's an
Yeah.
athlete that can be a two-way player. And if she gets more of an opportunity to hit at Nebraska, that will be a big story all in itself.
Rhonda Revelle told me she will hit, and that's one of the things she's excited about is to hit because in Oklahoma you're just working to hit
Yeah.
that lineup, and that might make her a very popular pick for National Player of the Year. That's to me is the favorite. Do you agree with me there that in a way by her being in Nebraska and doing more is probably going to give her a better chance to win National Player of the Year? We got Valerie Cagle, the reigning National Player of the Year. She's back. You got Jennings and Coleman with Oklahoma. We got a lot of depth. I feel sorry for whoever has got to narrow down the list from 50 to 25 to 10 to eventually get down to the top three players, because we got some depth this year, I feel like.
Yeah, I think so too. The value that a pitcher hitter has statistically on a team is through the roof when you talk about wins above replacement. So that WAR stat is what helps, somebody like Valerie Cagle solidify their position as a National Player of the Year because of their like they would be a contender, or she would be a contender just as a pitcher. She would be a contender just as a hitter. And we know that about Cagle because she's proven herself. So the question, becomes with Jordy, the opportunity is absolutely there for her. We know that she's one of the best pitchers, but how will she hit? Will she be up to that level of Cagle? And obviously the potential is 100% there. And a big opportunity for Jordy to kind of, show people a different part of her game. And I think she just seems really, on social media, she just seems really happy, like being back home and getting to be, near her family and represent Nebraska, who she was committed to before she decommitted to go to Oklahoma. Like just an interesting story. And I like following her. She's a big face in her sport, like Nigel Kennedy and Valerie Cagle. And let's see how she does wearing a different uniform, different red color
A
uniform.
little different red. And who knows? Could we see Nebraska Oklahoma play down the road in the postseason? That could be incredible storylines, drama there if those two get to match up. And who knows? You're right. Nebraska, I think they're poised to Coach Revelle. They're trying to host a regional. We'll see how that goes from that standpoint. Of course, you mentioned Valerie Cagle. Of course, she's with Clemson, part of the ACC. They've been to the Supers the last couple of years. Florida State has been the team in the ACC. They were once again playing for the national championship last year. They don't have Catherine Sandercock. More of a committee approach, Coach Alameda told me. We'll see if McKenna Reed takes that next step. They got some young pitchers. Cagle, Clemson, veteran groups back. Duke returns just about everybody as well. Your thoughts on the ACC this year?
I think the question is still who's going to be that next team that breaks through to the World Series. We've kind of been saying this on repeat, I think, for a couple of years now. And I think that Florida State, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Duke are at that upper echelon of the ACC. And we've seen Florida State, I mean, they were national runner up last year, as you mentioned. Who's going to be that next team? I think that Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Duke all want to be that team to carry the torch of the ACC. And they're all incredibly talented, all have had the talk around them and have had quality wins, but you have to do it in the postseason. And I think that they all know that. Um, Virginia Tech lost a lot of offense, but they do, of course, have Emma Lemley coming back, and she's dominant. And now she doesn't have to worry about the illegal pitch rules. She had worked so hard on keeping her drag foot down to abide by the pitching rules last season. But now that they've changed, she'll be one of the pitchers that I think could be affected the most in a good way by that, to where she's not thinking about it as much. She gave up a lot of home runs last year with her rise ball. So she'll need, just with that rise ball, it is high risk, high reward with every pitcher. And for her, the amount of home runs that she gave up last night just hurts me, or last year, hurts me for her. But hopefully that the rule change will get her back into her freshman form.
No doubt. And feels like for Clemson, it's got to be this year, right? Cagle's last year. You got to get veteran group. Could be this year for them if maybe they're the team that could break through. Duke was a top 8 seed. They hosted the Supers, ran into the buzzsaw that was Stanford. You're right. This feels like it's got to be this year that the ACC gets that non-Florida State team into the World Series. Either joins FSU or maybe represents the ACC if FSU doesn't get there.
Well, we can't forget how Clemson represented in their super regional against Oklahoma. Like,
Yes.
that seems like ages ago, but we saw them compete. They were right there in that game too. Remember, Oklahoma ended up
Yes.
having this miraculous comeback, but we saw Clemson just go out and absolutely compete against the best team on our sport. And that in itself should give them confidence coming into this year. They return a lot, including Cagle, and I'm sure that they were a little bit upset about maybe the seed that they got, grabbing the 16 seed, got paired with Oklahoma as the 1 seed. So I think that they're going to have a tougher schedule. A lot of that had to do with the schedule that they played last year and their strength of schedule being in the triple digits, I believe.
Yeah.
So putting together a stronger strength of schedule will not only make them better for the postseason in the long run in terms of experience and tough games, but also should help, if they put some wins together with that tough schedule, not have to go face Oklahoma as the 1 versus 16 seed. So Clemson, they've built every year. They've gotten a little bit better every year. And John Rittman always reminds his team of that, despite falling short of the World Series last year and having to face Oklahoma. This is a Clemson team that has gotten better and better and gone further and further every year.
And he acknowledged about the schedule strength, and they've definitely addressed that this year. They're going to open up in Clearwater in the NFCA Classic. They got Tennessee on the schedule, got Georgia on the schedule. So I think you're right. He's definitely, and you should, when you got a group led by Valerie Cagle, that's definitely something you could do with that. And you're right. I think Duke and Clemson, I'm curious if they push Florida State. And I hope we're going to probably take Florida State for granted. Next thing you know, they're like, oh, that Coach Alameda figured it out again with the pitching, right? That's going to be the same story with them.
Well, and two, speaking of pitching, I love Cassidy Curd for Duke. I felt like she had such a good year last year, and lefty, rise ball, great spin. And I think that you're seeing that more, Eric, is going to be a theme this year, is rise ball dominance. It was a theme a little bit last year, but these younger pitchers are coming in with legitimate rise ball stuff. Somebody like Nigel Kennedy, like Jordy Ball, like Emma Lemley, like Stephanie Schoonover, like Peyton Monticelli, like Cassidy Curd, like the pitchers right now that are having the most dominant moments. I mean, Cassidy Curd even threw a no-hitter in the ACC tournament. They have a legitimate rise ball, and that rise ball dominance is to me, when you have a good one with the spin and also the velocity, it's what's able to counteract these explosive offenses. So starting to see that more. Look for that this year, and I think that multiple of these younger pitchers are bringing that to the college level, and not just having as a pretty good pitch, but a dominant pitch for them.
Yeah, Curd was an 18-game winner, 18-3 last year. Do you have any theories why we're seeing that with now the dominant rise ball pitchers here as we're going? Is there a theory behind that?
I think maybe you just know that it's what you need to combat these good hitters to get the ball up and in on their hands, to get them to swing underneath it in a more like heavy launch angle approach and with more focus, from a hitting perspective of trying to hit more home runs, right? Like you're going to need to get the bottom of the ball, and a good rise ball pitcher is going to jump over the bat as you swing underneath it. So you can just tell that rise ball has always been dominant in our sport, of course, but I think that you're starting to see the pitchers that are the most dominant. That's not to say you can't be very good as a drop ball pitcher. We need them too, but I think the highest value that we have as a pitcher on staff is going to be with a great rise ball.
Which team in the country do you think is under? You're very. We've had you on. You've always got that one team that you've got your eye on that maybe you feel is under the radar. That, hey, don't be shocked if we're talking about this team in Oklahoma City in a couple of months. They may not be in that conversation right now, but they could be in that conversation a couple of months from now. Do you have that team yet that you're kind of intrigued by, that to watch and see if maybe this team could be that team that you see in OKC, or at least
Yeah, that's a
threaten?
great question. Yeah. I didn't intuitively have that coming into this call, but have the top 25 open. And I mean, maybe somewhere like an Oregon,
Yeah,
Eric. Like I feel
yeah.
like that team is building, and their coaching staff, adding Sydney Romero, who has that World Series experience. Like I feel like that's a team that has been building and building. Of course, Missy Lombardi knows how to win too. So I'm gonna say Oregon.
I'm with you on Oregon. I think Oregon's a sleeper in that Pac-12 if you want to talk about, a team that could be a legit threat for a conference title. And that's been the thing. They finally got over the regional. They won in Fayetteville against Arkansas before losing Oklahoma State. Now, all of a sudden, they bring back the pitchers there. They got some good bats. They added Koff, the catcher from Georgia Tech. Maybe and I think talking to Coach Lombardi, they can get themselves in position to be a host the Supers instead of going on the road. They've had to go on the road the last couple of years. That's a team to watch with Jane Sanders. Tough place to play. I think that's a team to watch. I agree, from the West Coast that could maybe the Pac-12's been good. Multiple bids into the World Series. Maybe it's Oregon's turn perhaps on that one. I don't know if Texas counts because they're ranked so high, but considering I'm just really impressed with Mike White's young. I know he's always been a great recruiter, so I shouldn't be surprised. But that young talent, that core, that sophomore class plus that freshman class to go along with these I think Texas is not only a threat for Oklahoma City, but they could get back to that championship series they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be really good too. And speaking of freshman pitchers that, we're going to get a chance to see, Tegan Kavan for them. She's actually from Iowa, I believe.
Yes.
She looked really good in the fall. I saw her pitch. She can be dominant. And Citlali Gutierrez, who was a freshman last year. We think of that sophomore class and all their hitters, but Citlali Gutierrez had a lot of experience last year and a lot of good tools for her too. So a lot of returners for Texas. And I think that they were so young last year, that extra year of experience plus the freshman class that they have that's stellar, could be good for them.
And then if Baylor's healthy, if their pitchers are healthy, that could be a team that can make a run to Oklahoma City. We saw them last year, how they would beat Tennessee, beat Oklahoma. I mean, if they didn't lose to Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament, maybe they would have been a national seed host. But Glenn Moore told me their top two pitchers will be on a pitch count early in the season. We'll see about health. You know all about injuries and pitchers. You just never know. But if they're healthy, I would watch out for Baylor, too, as a sleeper for Oklahoma City.
Yeah, Dariana Orm has had a lot of big wins in her career. Their ace pitcher, and then Aaliyah Benford, who was actually, I think, closed the game to get the win or to finish the win against Oklahoma. She got hurt, and so she has a ton of different mix of speed, change up. So the fact that she's back and, like you said, likely will be on a pitch count, but that they'll have her back, good leader, hitter, athlete for them. So I'm sure they're happy to have her back.
And then lastly, we talked briefly about Florida. Arkansas is another team that's got questions pitching, but they got a great offense back. DJ Gasso now is running the offense over there. That's another interesting, juicy storyline. We got a lot in the sport here, man. You got a lot to follow here.
Well, they're going to be able to swing it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And with bringing in DJ Gasso, that was a big get for them in terms of coaching staff. And also Danielle Gibson, another return home theme that I have going here, that she returned to their coaching staff after a great career at Arkansas. But what's life like without Shanice Dells or Mary Half or Autumn Storms? Like, we
Yeah.
don't have one of them in the circle. So I think it'll be a lot of inexperience and youth in the circle. But I think that they're really going to be able to swing it, bring back a lot of big hitters, and add somebody like Brie Ellis, transfer from Auburn. That will be a big addition to their lineup to add more power.
No doubt. I think that'll be interesting. And we touched on it earlier. Caleb Bro and Francesca going from the booth to coaching. I talked to Stacey Newman about that. She's done that. You're not going to do that, are you, man? Do we have to worry about losing you two now? I don't want to lose you in the
I'm
booth.
going
Come
to
on.
keep everybody on their toes. I don't want to show my hand. I don't want to show my hand about what I'm doing.
Fair.
Don't want to put it all. No, I mean, I love calling games. So it would take a lot for me to go and coach for sure.
Well, that's going to be fascinating how Kayla and Fran do.
Yeah, no,
And
Caleb Rowe, another return home. I'm telling
yeah,
you, like, that was the theme, was return home. Like that, everybody's returning home. So interesting. Kennedy Powell, who transferred from UCLA to A&M, she's from
yes.
Houston. Like, I just saw over and over, and I'm sure I'm missing so many examples, but like, once Jordy Ball did it, seemed like everybody else is returning home too. She set the
Started
tone
a
in the
trend.
offseason.
Started a trend. Started a trend. Should be fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Any final thoughts? Give me your final. I'm not gonna ask you for your picks in the World Series because you're still kind of working through it. I know it. Promise I wasn't gonna ask you. You're gonna ask you. You're gonna. I'm sure unveil some picks down the road here. But Give me your final thoughts here as we wrap this up. What are you looking forward to the most this year, and maybe or tease us with some maybe things to look for.
Um, Great question. I feel like we talked about a lot of good things. Like the rise ball dominance is something
Yeah.
that I'm looking for from the pitchers. Also, freshman pitchers is what I'm looking for. Like, I feel like we had a lot breakthrough last year as freshmen who are now sophomores. Can they continue to build on what they did last year? And can this new group of freshman pitchers continue to dominate? And then, just paying close attention to the last year of the Pac 12 and the last year with the Big 12. I mean, not last, but you know what I mean? Like, as we know it, even though it's a new look for the Big 12, I'll be paying close attention to that. Like, and then Oklahoma's pitchers, all those new faces that are a part of their team, how will they do?
I wonder too, right? As a fan, you kind of take it all in this year, right? Because the Pac-12 won't be this, as we know it. Take it in probably more than usual, right? You just don't take it from the last UCLA Washington series or UCLA Arizona. Same thing with Oklahoma Texas in the Big 12. Those last matchups between Bedlam potentially could be the last time they play, or at least in the regular season, or Oklahoma and Baylor. I think that's the other thing too, is some nostalgic there of kind of like, man, this is, part of it'll be, we'll miss, but like I said, I hope somebody's got like a 30 for 30 ready because I feel like this year is a 30 for 30 made event coming.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I hope that our sport continues to grow with the momentum. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
volleyball is really taking off, and so is women's basketball. And I hope that we can start to feel from weekend one on that same type of momentum with thousands of, like, with sellouts and more season tickets sold. And I don't know. I feel like volleyball and women's basketball have that right now, and softball does too. But I just want to feel more of it. I want to feel more of a push of momentum and energy around it. And hopefully, we'll feel it, or continue to build off of what volleyball and women's basketball have done leading into our season.
Well, I know the event that will certainly help with that is Clearwater. You're going to be on the air a lot. I'm like, what, 12 games you told me you're calling?
12 games. Yeah. You'll hear me a lot. Don't get tired of me, but
No, I get frustrated because I'll be there, but I can't, like, we're both gonna be in the same premise, but I can't, like, we can't even talk because you're like so swamped. So basically, the best I could do is like a wave. That's it, like from the booth, and that's all I
yeah.
can get. But it's gonna be packed. It's gonna be another year exciting of that term. I know you look forward to that every year.
Yeah,
Like
it's just
a mini
it's such a
event.
great it's such a great way to see, so many awesome teams right out of the gate, and to have softball on TV. So now, not only do we have it at Clearwater, we have the two opening games, are UCLA Texas, UCLA Oklahoma State on ESPN opening weekend, so the weekend before Clearwater. And then at Clearwater on Sunday night, we have two games on ESPN, UCF, UCLA, and then Tennessee, Florida State, I believe that second one is.
Yep.
So that's huge. Like to have that and to create all this momentum early on with other linear games on TV, the first couple of weekends of our season is absolutely huge. And hopefully we just continue to build on it throughout the year.
And we look forward to hearing your voice on many of the calls. Certainly in Clearwater, you mentioned that. Of course, season starts UCLA, Texas, UCLA, Oklahoma State. I'm glad. I'm glad. Let's get more softball on linear. I'm all for it. Amanda, it's always a pleasure. We always enjoy you having you on every year. Very fitting that you're part of the 800th episode of In the Circle because
Yeah.
you're one of our favorites. You've always been so kind to the show. This is one of my favorite episodes of the year. We just ramble on for softball. Next thing you know, an hour's done, and we like covered everything. Like it seemed like 5 minutes, but
I know. I'm sure we missed so much too that will and like and you know what I love too at the beginning of the season, Eric, there's so much yet to be uncovered. Like,
yeah,
in a month even, we're going to have so many more storylines than what we have right now. Like this is just going into the season and there's so much yet to happen, which is just so exciting for the rest of the year.
agreed. That's the beauty of it. We got to keep bringing it on, and more topics will come up, more storylines will develop as the year. Hopefully, for another exciting year. Before you know it, mayhem will arrive, and then we'll be like, "Where did the season go?"
I
But
know.
Amanda, always a pleasure. I'll see you in Clearwater. But like I said, thanks for always talking to us here over the years on In the Circle. Like I said, your fourth straight year we've done the season preview. Like people constantly ask about you coming on. So thank you from your busy schedule. And you do have a busy schedule for taking a few minutes every year to talk to us. Always appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me and congrats again on show number 800.